Three things just happened inside the XRP ecosystem that almost nobody is connecting. Exchanges are now actively promoting Ripple. A coming wave of AI robots is going to need a payment layer, and XRP is being built for exactly that job. And the banks that spent years fighting crypto are now being forced onto a level playing field they did not design and cannot control. Stay right here. What is good, everyone? John OG here. I go deep on the real data behind crypto and global finance. No noise, no moon talk, just straight research. Let's get into it. Before we start, everything in this video is for educational purposes only. Nothing here is financial advice. Crypto is volatile. Do your own research and speak with a qualified professional before making any investment decisions. Let me start with the exchange story, because I think people are misreading what is happening here, and it is actually more significant than the headline suggests. In January 2026, Binance, the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange by trading volume, listed Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin with immediate spot trading pairs, including XRP RLUSD and RLUSD USDT. They also launched a zero-fee promotion on RLUSD trading pairs at launch. That is not a passive listing. That is an active promotion. Binance does not give zero fees to assets it is indifferent about. Zero-fee promotions are reserved for assets they want to onboard liquidity to, assets they believe have a future inside their ecosystem. And then in February 2026, Binance completed the full integration of RLUSD on the XRP Ledger network, opening deposits and withdrawals directly through the XRPL rails. Now think about what this means in practice. The largest exchange on the planet just plugged Ripple's stablecoin directly into its infrastructure using the XRP Ledger as the settlement network. Every time RLUSD moves on Binance through the XRPL rails, it reinforces the ledger's role as a working settlement layer for real financial volume. Analysts noted at the time that every RLUSD trade can indirectly drive demand for XRP as a bridge asset, reinforcing its utility within Ripple's payment products. And it is not just Binance. Coinbase, the largest US-regulated exchange, has been actively documenting and promoting the X402 protocol, a new open standard for machine-native payments that runs directly on-chain. I will come back to X402 in a moment, because that is arguably the most important technical development in the XRP story right now, and most people outside the developer community have not caught up with what it means. The broader signal here is that exchanges, which for years maintained a cautious, almost arm's-length relationship with XRP during the SEC litigation period, are now actively building infrastructure around it. They are putting engineering resources, promotion budgets, and platform real estate behind Ripple's ecosystem. That is a shift in stance. It is not accidental and it is not neutral. It reflects a changed regulatory environment and a changed institutional perception of where XRP sits in the landscape of serious digital assets. Now let me move to the part of the story that I find genuinely fascinating and that I think is going to define a major new narrative for XRP over the next 2 to 3 years: the robots. And I do not mean that metaphorically. I mean actual autonomous AI software agents that are beginning to operate as independent economic actors on the internet. Here's the setup. On February 26, 2026, Ripple made a strategic investment in T54 Labs as part of a $5 million seed round. Franklin Templeton, one of the largest asset managers in the United States, also participated in the same round. T54 Labs describes itself as the trust layer for what it calls the agentic economy. Let me explain what that means because the implications for XRP are substantial. An AI agent is a piece of software that can take autonomous actions on behalf of a human or institution, browsing the web, executing tasks, making decisions, interacting with services, without needing a human to approve every individual step. Right now, according to data from Agent EVM, there are roughly 27,900 AI agents deployed on Ethereum and 20,600 on Coinbase's base network. That number is growing exponentially. The projection, across multiple research frameworks, is that AI agent activity will scale to billions of individual software transactions annually within the next few years, and every one of those transactions needs a payment layer. Here is the problem that T54 Labs, and by extension Ripple, is trying to solve. Sending value across a blockchain is no longer the technically hard part. Most major networks can do it quickly enough. The hard part is accountability. When an autonomous AI agent is paying for a service, the business receiving that payment needs to know who controls the agent, what permissions it has, whether it can be stopped, and who is legally liable if something goes wrong. That is not a nice to have. For regulated businesses and financial institutions, those are non-negotiable operational requirements. Anonymous wallets and loose coordination do not work in a compliance-first environment. This is precisely the gap that T54's infrastructure is designed to fill on the XRP Ledger. They built a live implementation of something called the X402 protocol, which is a new way for AI agents to pay for services directly inside web workflows. Think of it this way. Instead of an AI agent needing an API key, a subscription, or a human to approve a payment, it can call an endpoint, receive a payment challenge, settle automatically using XRP or RLUSD on the XRP Ledger, and continue its workflow. All in real time with no manual reconciliation, no invoice, no bank transfer. The whole process happens inside the machine workflow itself. T54 launched its X402 facilitator on the XRP Ledger on February 19, 2026. AI agents can now pay for services using XRP and RLUSD on-chain, with no API keys, no accounts, and no third-party authorization required. Coinbase has promoted X402 as an open standard for machine-native payments, and their documentation published on March 1, 2026, reinforces the framing: payments inside workflows, not after them. Now let me put some numbers around the scale of what this could mean. CryptoSlate's detailed analysis of the T54 investment laid out a straightforward scenario model. If X402 reaches 1 billion transactions per year and the XRP Ledger captures 5% of that activity, that is 50 million XRPL transactions per year, roughly 137,000 per day. If X402 scales to 10 billion transactions annually and XRPL captures 5%, you are looking at 500 million transactions per year, about 1.37 million per day. At that level, the demand for on-ledger liquidity, stable settlement balances, compliance infrastructure, and RLUSD as the working digital cash of autonomous commerce becomes genuinely transformative. My personal view on this, and I want to be clear, this is my analysis, not a price target or a guarantee, is that the AI agent payment narrative is probably the most underappreciated catalyst in the XRP ecosystem right now. The crypto media is focused on Bitcoin ETF inflows and macro price action. Meanwhile, Ripple is quietly building the identity, compliance, and payment rails that could become the trust layer for an economy of hundreds of millions of autonomous software agents. If even a fraction of that machine-to-machine commerce runs through XRPL and settles in RLUSD, the demand dynamics for both assets change in a way that has nothing to do with retail speculation. It is driven by software transaction volume, and software does not panic sell. Now let me address the banking piece, the level playing field argument, because this is the thread that ties the whole story together, and that explains why the tone around XRP has shifted so visibly in 2026. For most of the past decade, banks had a structural advantage over crypto in one critical area: regulatory clarity. They knew the rules. They knew how to operate within them. They could hold assets, offer custody, settle transactions, and interface with the global payment system because the legal framework said they could. Crypto companies, including Ripple, operated in a state of sustained legal ambiguity, and the SEC's December 2020 lawsuit against Ripple was the most visible expression of that asymmetry. Banks could point at the lawsuit and say, "We cannot touch XRP, it is a legal risk." That advantage is dissolving rapidly in 2026. The Genius Act, signed into law in July 2025, created a comprehensive regulatory framework for payment stablecoins that applies equally to banks and to non-bank institutions. RLUSD is Genius Act compliant. Any bank that wants to issue its own stablecoin now has to meet the same standards Ripple already meets. The OCC conditionally approved Ripple for a national trust bank charter in January 2026, placing it in the same regulatory category as Fidelity Digital Assets, Circle, and Paxos. The Clarity Act, which the Trump administration has been actively pushing and which JP Morgan said in March 2026 could unlock institutional capital flows if passed by mid-year, would explicitly classify XRP as a non-security commodity, removing the final legal ambiguity that gave banks cover to stay on the sidelines. As Forbes reported in February 2026, U.S. regulators, including the OCC and CFTC, have laid a friendly foundation for crypto, but banks are pushing back. That pushback is not principled, it is competitive. The banks that object most vocally to crypto's regulatory progress are the same institutions that have the most to lose from a payment infrastructure that bypasses their correspondent banking networks, eliminates the nostro vostro fees they have charged for decades, and allows new entrants to compete for global payment flows without holding a banking license. The level playing field is arriving whether the legacy banking system welcomes it or not, And the ABA Banking Journal noted just this week that banks of all sizes are now planning for the future of stablecoins, tokenized deposits, and other digital assets. Not wondering about it, planning for it. Because the regulatory framework now exists, and banks that ignore it will cede ground to institutions like Ripple that have been building in this space for years. What we are watching in 2026 is three converging forces that all benefit the same asset. First, exchanges are actively promoting Ripple's ecosystem, giving RLUSD and by extension XRP a level of platform visibility and infrastructure depth that did not exist 12 months ago. Second, the emerging agentic economy, potentially billions of AI-driven transactions, is creating demand for exactly the kind of fast, programmable, compliance-ready payment layer that the XRP Ledger and RLUSD were built to provide. Third, the regulatory playing field is leveling in a way that removes the structural advantage banks have used to keep institutional capital out of XRP for years. None of these forces are price catalysts in the narrow, short-term sense. A Binance listing does not guarantee a price move tomorrow. The X402 protocol is early-stage infrastructure that will take time to scale. The Clarity Act has not passed yet. These are trend lines, not events. But the direction of all three is consistent, and the consistency across three separate domains, market structure, technology, and regulation, is the kind of signal that serious long-term investors pay attention to. I will leave you with this observation. The assets that generate lasting wealth are almost never the ones that feel obvious at the peak of excitement. They are the ones that are quietly building infrastructure during the uncertain periods, when the price is down, when the narrative is complicated, when the media has moved on. Right now, while XRP trades at a significant discount to its all-time high and retail attention is largely elsewhere, Binance is integrating RLUSD, T54 is building AI payment rails on XRPL, Franklin Templeton is co-investing with Ripple, Coinbase is promoting an open payment standard that runs on the XRP Ledger, and the US government is legislating a framework that validates everything Ripple has built. If that picture is visible to you now, before it becomes obvious to everyone, then the question is not whether the opportunity exists. The question is whether you are patient enough to let it develop. That is everything I have got for you today. If this gave you a clearer picture of where XRP is heading and why, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next deep dive. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everything, and I want to know where you stand on this. I am John OG. Stay patient, stay grounded, and I will see you in the next one.